it's gonna be alright.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Try and Stupid, where I take a look at the wonderful world of LGBTQIA+ news because stupidity is intersectional. So I want to start this week off by touching in with one of the most controversial characters in trans politics, and that of course is Jessica Yaniv, the Titanic troon from Canada, who's currently taking a number of women through a human rights tribunal for refusing to wax his balls. And just to point out, from now on, Yaniv is getting hymns because, quite frankly, I don't think he is worthy of any respect. And the reason why I wanted to touch on Yaniv this week is because we're getting a little bit of a better understanding as to where the future of this dangerous individual might be going. So it turned out that a couple of weeks ago, Yaniv joined a babysitting group in Canada, presumably to try and find work as a babysitter. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the kind of messages Yaniv has sent young people in the past.
Everyone loves the pussy.
A lot of them are outright terrifying, and I think we're at the point now where it's beyond reasonable doubt that all of this was Yaniv. So within this group, this was flagged up to the people who ran it, and as a result, Yaniv was booted, and rightly so. You wouldn't want somebody like this anywhere near your children, especially with such damning evidence against them. Now, it wasn't just Jessica Yaniv who got banned, but his Jonathan form as well. So he was really quite desperate to get involved in this, and that is quite terrifying. It's quite a coincidence that this all came to light around the same time that another case in Canada is being taken through the Human Rights Tribunal, where a man is accused of sexism because he asked for the gender of the potential babysitter, who in this instance was male. And Yaniv has taken a very particular interest in this and has retweeted and even tweeted out a message of support for the person taking this man through the tribunal, saying that he would like to apply to intervene in this, to defend the man, because this is another important case. So Yaniv wants to waddle in there, drive in on his fatty scooter, whatever way he's just going to shove his bulk in there. And naturally he attracted a lot of criticism for this, but with him being removed from this babysitting group in general, are we going to see another human rights tribunal case involving people booting out Yaniv for very good reasons, only for him to then take them through the human rights tribunal himself? And I think a lot of that might be weighted on whether Yaniv is indeed successful in his first attempt. I'm really hoping that he's not going to be successful. We're probably not going to find out for another couple of months as to whether he is against the women who refuse to wax his testicles, but that is a possibility. And if it is, I think we're going to see him go on a real crusade, taking more of these people to court. And I think that even if that isn't what happens, the fact that this individual still is being very, very blatant when it comes to getting involved with minors. He's already tweeted out another message regarding his swimming events for topless 12-year-olds. He's still very adamant that should be going ahead. Now, I do think that Yaniv tries to be controversial for attention, and I can see a lot of that with his interactions with Blair White. And admittedly, he bit off more than he could chew with her because, unlike him, Blair ain't an idiot, and Blair is probably going to be his downfall. But we can ignore his attempts at wanting to start a YouTube channel to really take her on, and his bizarre accusations that he is this gorgeous beauty queen or loved within the trans world, which, you know, very few people genuinely like him. I know there's a lot of silence from the big name activists, but, you know, the people who are talking about Yaniv generally don't like him. But what I think is most troubling about him is just the whole way in which he's a blatant child predator. And this is why, as much as I don't want to be giving him attention, until the police in Canada actually take action against him, which at the moment the only action they seem to be taking is regarding his access to a taser, where I believe he's being seen in court around December. But that can't be it. There's so much out there on this guy that we need to make sure he's fully exposed to the law, not him being exposed to anyone else. I mean, we don't want to see any more of that. But I think Yaniv needs to be stopped. And if the only way of us stopping him is by making people aware of what this monster really is, then that is something I'm going to have to continue doing. I don't want to always be talking about him. I think there is a lot more going on in the world, but until something actually is done about this, we almost have no choice. And I would encourage everyone to, whilst not necessarily respond to his calls for attention, whenever there's anything involving him and children, make sure the world knows exactly what he's like. So moving on from one predator to another, I wanted to take a look at a recent court case in Idaho where the court said that gender confirmation surgery must be provided to a transgender inmate. The Ninth Circuit Courts of Appeals has ruled that the state of Idaho must provide gender confirmation surgery to inmate Andre Edmo. The panel of judges agreed with the District Judge B. Lynn Windmill's ruling in Edmo's favour last December, saying his findings were logical and well supported, and that responsible prison officials were deliberately indifferent to Edmo's gender dysphoria in violation of the Eighth Amendment. And this means that Edmo could be the first transgender inmate in the nation to receive sex reassignment surgery through a court order. Now, when it comes to prisoners being given trans healthcare, I know that's something which is controversial, but before I go into what my feelings on this are, let's read the next paragraph so we get a good understanding of who this individual actually is. Edmo is serving a 10-year prison sentence for sexually abusing a 15-year-old boy when she was 22. She is scheduled for release in 2021 and is not eligible for parole. Per Idaho Department of Correction policy, she will be transferred to a state women's prison following the surgery. Over the last decade, thanks to the open border we have on gender, we are seeing increasing numbers of people saying that they are trans men, trans women, non-binary, this, that, the moon, whatever. And especially when it comes to like so trans women, when I hear of sex offenders wanting to transition, this always rings alarm bells. We keep on being told that these people live miserable lives and they can't go on with their gender dysphoria. They hate the idea that they are men. But that hatred of them being men, apparently, did not stop them from raping and destroying countless innocent lives. So I am going to question whether someone has gender dysphoria if they are going to be doing such sick acts. These people are monsters. They are paedophiles. Now, before anyone says, well, this is typical of what trans women do, of course this isn't. Most trans women are not sexual predators. What I am talking about, however, are the rapists who do try and claim that they are trans. Now, the only argument I could really see for letting them have the gender reassignment surgery is it could actually decrease the chance of them being able to rape again. I mean, after all, they wouldn't be able to use a penis in that way. But I really find these people suspicious. If you really are transsexual, how are you okay with doing what you did? And what's more, the cruel and unusual treatment which they've given men, women and children in the past by raping them, all of a sudden it's cruel to not give them exactly what they want. I do think that having things like gender reassignment surgery is important for a trans woman. I'm not, however, comfortable with this being given to people who sexually offend as men and then announce to the world actually they are women. I mean, it comes across to me like these people might have a bit of a fetish and controlled very much by their own sexual desires. And I would find this very worrying for a rapist, a male rapist, to be put in a women's prison. My opinions when it comes to trans women in prisons would always be on whether they have the reassignment surgery or not. But I think when it comes to sexual predators, that is probably a hard limit. They're already a risk to vulnerable people in the population before they went into jail. Otherwise, you're just kind of putting them in with people who not exactly going to have the easiest way of defending themselves here. I think that this is a bad move, and if this wasn't a violent sexual predator, maybe I would think differently. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a rapist, a paedophile, someone who is absolute dirt. And I don't know whether I'm okay with this. Thankfully, for the rest of this episode, I'm going to move away from sexual predators and instead go back to the bizarre world of trans people in sports. This week I want to talk about a specific rugby player known as Kelly Morgan, who the BBC reported on last week. The piece reads, born Nicholas Green Morgan, she played representative rugby for East Wales as a teenager, but injury ended that initial involvement in the sport. However, after a decade wrestling with gender identity and transitioning to female, Kelly is back playing, and loving it. Having impressed in friendly fixtures for Porth Harlequins ladies, she now hopes to compete in the Welsh Women's Leagues from September. Welsh Rugby Union guidelines, which are fully committed to the principles of equality, state Kelly can play providing her blood-measured testosterone levels are within a certain range, and she has taken a daily dose of female hormone estrogen for the past 18 months. She says, "They don't half make you cry. My body shape, my size. It's scary the massive difference it makes. I don't think I'll ever get used to hormones." I mean, I got used to hormones incredibly quickly, but whatevs. At nearly 6 foot, she stands out among her teammates, and club captain Jessica Minty Madley recounts a time she folded an opponent like a deck chair. Well, that's a positive image for trans people in sport, isn't it? Someone who is so big that their teammates nickname them the Beast, folding someone like a deck chair. And a joke further on in the piece where they say, well, she'll be a great player so long as she stops injuring people, is not exactly going to be reassuring for any biological women who are hoping to join and play some rugby and are then going to come across Kelly. Now, every single trans subject is controversial, it seems. We can't seem to express any opinion on which things trans women should and should not be getting involved in without this being told that it's a bigoted opinion, that, you know, we just need to be able to accept it. And I'm very strongly starting to come to the opinion, especially with sports, that if you were born biologically male, it isn't really fair for you to be competing. And you know what? You should just accept that you can't get involved in this stuff anymore. You have had benefit from testosterone for many, many years. We're not talking about someone here who was on hormone blockers at a young age, someone who'd started taking estrogen around the ages of 15, 16 and would have developed very differently from myself or many other trans women. But what we're saying is someone who was transitioning seems to be, you know, in their good mid to late 20s, I would imagine, based on what this says. And that is a long time of being able to build up muscle, build up all the strength benefits that testosterone gives you. Now, I started taking hormones around the age of 22, and whilst that was probably on the more younger side when it comes to transitioning, I know that had I taken it earlier, it would have had a lot more of an impact on my body. When you're waiting longer than that, though, the getting rid of the kind of damage, as it were, that testosterone does is going to be more and more difficult to do. I just think people should accept that you're not going to be able to get involved in certain things as transitioning. I mean, given a choice between playing rugby or being a woman, which one is the bigger deal for you? Like, for me, I mean, I'm not really a sporty person anyway, but I would happily give up things just to be able to live the life the way that I am now. It's not a right for you to be able to get involved in every single thing. And I think, in a way, if there's enough people, you could probably start a trans women's or trans men's league for this kind of stuff. I mean, what would be wrong with that? You get to have your inclusive, completely all genders welcome sport. You can still play your sport. You don't have to play it in a very specific avenue. You can make your own leagues for this stuff. And why not do that? Wouldn't that be a great way of saying, look, you can get it, look, trans women, you can get involved in this. You'll be perfectly accepted. You won't have anyone wanting to shut you down or kick you out. We're all welcome here. Would that not be a better option? Because I don't think people are going to ever accept trans women, particularly big trans women, being involved in very physical sports like this. Now, the last story that I want to touch on this week is a topic I haven't discussed in a while, and that's the wonderful world of British universities. When I first started my channel, I was talking about them almost every single week. Whether it was the controversy of Jess Bradley, the NUS trans officer, who is still suspended because they're under police investigation for whipping their dick out at work and taking photos of it and putting it online, or just the general way in which student politics really promote themselves. I mean, we've seen how loony these people can get. And there has been a recent troubling story coming out of Bristol University, where a PhD student said bullying she experienced from transgender activists has left her feeling unsafe on campus and could cost her her visa. The abuse started just 2 months after Raquel Rosario Sanchez from the Dominican Republic started her PhD at Bristol University after she agreed to chair a meeting of the Women's Place UK group. The 29-year-old made a complaint to the university against a transgender student, and formal disciplinary proceedings were launched. The bullying escalated from there, as she had eggs and milkshakes thrown at her, was called heinous scum, and had a series of protests organised against her. She said to the Sunday Times, "I no longer feel safe on campus. Most people who are subject to abuse by trans activists stay silent, because if you file a complaint, you undergo the campaign of threats I have experienced." The university took a year to investigate the allegations, but no disciplinary action was taken. Rosario Sanchez said the bullying has caused her to fall behind in her PhD, and she has missed her progress review, so she can no longer receive funding from the Dominican Republic. She now faces losing her visa or taking out a large loan to fund the rest of her studies. Now, I'm not sure of the full background between her and this trans activist, but I am aware that there was something going on involving disciplinary action against a particular student, which I'm assuming would be this individual. Now, I don't know whether the allegations put forward by Rosario Sanchez are indeed true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were. I mean, we've seen what university students in modern day can be like. We've seen them shut down events and talks by people they don't like, walking in there screaming fascist, having megaphones blasting at them, launching milkshakes at people, calling them fascist scum. They act like lunatics. Whether it's people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Sargon of Akkad, or whether it could be gender-critical feminists who are coming on campus to say mean things about the trans. It's getting ridiculous with the way that these children are throwing tantrums because they don't like the other side. And one of the things that we're increasingly seeing with the far left is the way in which they justify their use of violence and intimidation tactics, because only their extremist viewpoints are allowed to be expressed on campuses, not anybody else's. Now, I don't really have much of an issue with Women's Place UK personally, but even if I did, it wouldn't justify this kind of treatment against someone. University students should be free to express their viewpoints on any subject. Part of university is to go there and really discover yourself and have these open discussions, but increasingly, we're seeing that that's not allowed on campus. And real authoritarian ideologues, mainly from the left, I should say, are stopping people from doing this. Even if we ignore the real impact that this has had on her life, and I wouldn't blame her for feeling the way that she does, trans activists need to stop acting in this way. What happened to just sitting down and talking with people? Is it really going to be left to just the people like myself who are willing to do this? So there's one last story that I want to touch on in this week's episode. Originally I wasn't going to cover it, however there has been a development since I did my filming, hence why this is being done in post. So I'm not sure how many of my viewers are aware of Magdalene Burns, a radical feminist who is incredibly critical of the trans rights movement, to put things lightly. Unfortunately, she has been fighting brain cancer for quite some time, and it looks like things are starting to take a turn for the worse. Despite this, however, some trans Twitter accounts decided to openly mock her for having brain cancer, in particular one known as Inflamed Turf Takes. Now, it should be said that there were many trans Twitter accounts that thoroughly condemned this way of thinking, and this is in no way a reflection of many trans rights activists. However, there was one notable individual who decided it is okay to mock someone suffering from brain cancer, and that is Rachel McKinnon, an incredibly controversial trans athlete, who said multiple tweets on this subject saying, maybe live by the maxim whereby don't be the sort of person who people you've harmed are happy you're dying of brain cancer, amongst other thoroughly reprehensible comments. Now, Rachel McKinnon is a disgusting human being. Mocking anyone for fighting cancer, regardless of whether you agree with them or not, is lower than low. McKinnon is someone who is often called up by the media as a representative of trans people. When you have someone like this who pushes for themselves to be in the public eye and to be the face of trans, as it were, and makes comments like this, it makes everyone look bad. Thankfully, there were people condemning her, such as Adrian Harrop. But this really needs to be brought to people's attention, as this is who Dr. McKinnon actually is. She is someone who celebrates cancer. She is vile, and really, she has no place as a representative for trans people. But what are your thoughts on the stories I've covered this week? Is there anything in particular I've missed out? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you like my work. You can also support me on Patreon and Subscribestar. I will also be doing a live stream next Saturday where my guests will be Miss London and Maya from Hiya, It's Maya. It's quite hard to really kind of pronounce like that. But I hope you all tune in for that. It's sure to be a good time, and I will see you all then. Bye. And a special thank you to Gotta Get Me, Prue, The Poor of Rizzo, James C. George, James UK, James Dorans, a lot of Jameses, Evil Moif, Sarah, and the rest of my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar.